This episode of Main Street Moxie is proudly sponsored by Oblong Books and Thorn Designs.
Hey, Thorin, how you doing today?
Good. And today is actually a Moxie Monday that we're recording this episode. So happy Moxie Monday to you.
And to you too. And so this guest is someone that you adore. And
I am a big fan, yes.
Yeah, so please tell us about Lexi Ryan.
So today we have author Lexi Ryan. Not only is she an author, but she's a New York Times bestselling author, as well as a USA Today bestselling author. If that weren't enough, she has published over 35 books. Most of them are in the contemporary romantic genre. But last year and this year, she published 2 books that are young adult, and they are fantastic. I happened upon her books by accident, and I became a huge fan. Never read either genre, and so I was hooked from the first sentence in the first chapter. And so to me, that's just a mark of a great writer. But the way she writes her characters and her stories and the intertwining, and then the bombs she drops along the way is just amazing. But her characters, they're mostly female led. And for the most part, even though her male leads are fantastic, but her characters all have moxie, even though they have insurmountable challenges, it seems, and how she plays that out in the books, each book so differently, and how you feel compassion for the characters. And even though the character may be going through something you may never even imagine or don't agree with, but you still connect with them in such a way, and you feel such compassion. And even though the characters may not think that they are strong or can get through this, by the end, how she weaves the story, they do. And so that, I think, to me, is one of the most compelling and inspirational things about her writing. I highly recommend to anyone interested in either genre, or if you just want to read a good book or a good series, she is it. So I am thrilled to welcome Lexi Ryan to our podcast today. The great thing about having Oblong as a sponsor of this episode is the fact that all of the books mentioned in this episode, as well as listed in the show notes, can be bought at Oblong.
Oblong bookstores have this amazing, chill literary vibe, and I love soaking it up while I'm scanning the titles.
My favorite thing is going into the children's section for the books, the toys. They are just fantastic. And my other favorite thing is that I follow them on social media, and their posts are so engaging, so visual, and I just love to see all the books that they're promoting and the authors and author signings that they have.
And Oblong Books, they aren't just bricks and mortar in the community. They are all in the community, active in many ways. You can find them at 26 Main Street in Millerton and Montgomery Row in Rhinebeck, and their website is www.oblongbooks.com.
Lexi, so excited to have you on our podcast today. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Great. The first question we always ask everyone is, how would you define moxie?
So I love this word. And it's funny because I don't actually think I use it that much, but to me, it has like a feminine energy. I know it's not really a gendered term, but to me, anything you do, you can do with moxie to add a little bit of spunk to it. So if you're a bank robber and you rob that bank with moxie, you're wearing your red heels and your pearls. You know what I mean? Or, it's a choice to go about the things you do with a little bit of extra joie de vivre, a little bit of extra oomph in it, and living your life with purpose and go after what you're going after. Don't be okay, it's not the toe in the water, it's the jumping into the deep end. To me, that's what moxie is all about.
And how have you used that to become not just a New York Times, but a USA Today bestselling author?
Oh my goodness. Well, I did jump right into the deep end. So I've kind of got a long journey to publication, but I'll try to give you the short version. I was published with a small press in 2008, 2009. They did some short stories, a couple paranormal romances, super sexy, Charlie's Angels with Superpower. I think of it that way. And then it just didn't, it wasn't rolling the way I needed it to. It takes a lot of time from family to write a book, and making a few $100s a book was not doing it. I couldn't justify it. So I was like, oh, absolutely. I'm just going to New York or bust, right? Like I want the big five. It's big four now, I believe. May have been big six then because I'm old, but they're just the big publishers. That's what I want. And I banged my head against that door, and agents and publishers and agents and publishers, and got nowhere. And in 2012, decided that, it's time to either let this go or try to do something that my friends seemed to be having some success with and self-publish, which wasn't, when I came into the business, I finished my first book in 2005. So back then it was like self-publishing meant you paid for a big print run of your books,
Right.
and then you're like literally hand selling them. And I had no interest in that ever. Like I did not want anything to do with that. But with digital books becoming so popular, especially with romance readers, especially with readers who liked sexy literature, it suddenly was an option. And suddenly it wasn't about hand selling and anybody you could say, hey, buy my book. Like it was really an option. And so every bit of money that I'd made from that small press had gone into savings. And so that was my startup money for jumping into self-publishing in 2012. And I was hopeful that I could be a series-driven author and do the whole write a series, make the first book free, get people to follow me. And my goal was in 5 years, I wanted to be able to leave the day job. I was an English professor who desperately wanted to write full time. And I did it in one. I did it in 1 year.
Oh, wow.
Part of that was just sheer stubbornness and like working way too much. And part of it was luck. I mean, the market was right where I needed it to be at the right moment. So definitely decided to just go for it. And it wasn't like a shot out of the cannon, out of the gate, like a lot of stories you'll hear from that era were. For me, it was I really had to work for it. I didn't get that like initial traction. But by February of 2013, I'd hit New York Times and USA Today kind of out of nowhere. It was off of a promotion, but my sales up to that point wouldn't indicate that was the trajectory I was on. It'd been like a slow uptick, but I'd just done all the things, like I read everything I could get my hands on about how to get people to find your books. And I would argue still free, it was the way to go. Well, I didn't have a series at that point. I had a couple novels and I had the rights back to my small press novels, but just didn't have a series to really jump off with. So I wrote a short story with the intention of cannibalizing it. I mean, like, don't do this, but you know what? I'm going to write this short story and I'm going to put 3 chapters of text appeal because that's what I had. That was my first book out. I'm going to put 3 chapters of text appeal at the back of it. And I'm going to put the short story for free. So people will get hooked and hopefully then go buy text appeal. And it worked. Granted, you're going to take a lot of hits on that story because people are mad that they got 3 chapters of this story at the end of this other short story and now they have to go buy something. But at the time, it served its purpose. It did exactly what I needed it to. Yeah. And I ran promotions.
And what shoes were you wearing?
I'm actually not a heels person. I do have red heels that are great for pictures. I'm a Chucks and pearls kind of girl, like.
I can meet you there.
Well, where did you go from there after that? And it feels like the technology has certainly played, and the change in technology has certainly played a lot in your success as well. And so how did that help move you forward after that?
Yeah. So technology is a huge piece of success and also a piece of the decisions that I made.
Oh, interesting.
So like I said, early 2013, text appeal hit USA Today and New York Times. And that's how I got my agent, who I'm still with to this day. His name's Dan. And he was very much of the school of thought that, okay, indie publishing is here to stay. I'm not interested in being a publisher, because some agents at the time were like, okay, well, we'll just do all the indie publishing for our clients and they can pay us 15% of that. And I was not going to do that. No, it takes me 30 minutes to upload my book everywhere. I'm not going to give you 15% forever for that. So he very much, indie money is your money. I'm here. If you want me, I can sell your subsidiary rights. I can sell your foreign rights. And of course, I was all about that. So I found my agent in 2013. He found me, and people were kind of dropping in if you hit the New York Times and you're not represented, people are going to drop in your inbox, right? And so we had lots of conversations and decided we'd like to work together. And then I released my first new adult novel in May of 2013. Now, new adult was super hot at that time. It generally meant like it was going to be romance, but it was going to be very sexy, and it was going to be angsty. Now it's evolved, and my French publisher uses the label new romance because for them it's not necessarily the age, it's the feel. So they would qualify even it doesn't matter what age the characters are. They don't have to be college age. They can be 30 years old, and it's new romance, which is like that heavier, angstier, often first person, but not necessarily. So I made a shift in my tone to thinking that I wanted to hit that market. And I had this book sitting around. The original title was Sex, Secrets, and Sabotage. Ooh. And I always tried to figure out, what can I do with this book? What can I do with this book? Because I loved it so much. The core story in it, I loved so much. So I completely rewrote it. It was originally a romantic suspense written in the third person and had all of these various subplots with the different characters. And instead it became, I rewrote it in first person with it's a love triangle. So I had 3 points of view, which at the time I was like, I'm not allowed to do this. Am I? Am I allowed to do this? I'm going to do this. So I did it anyway. And then the subplots that I pulled out eventually, those were like the sister stories that eventually came later. And again, they evolved, they changed quite a bit, but the core of who they were stayed the same. And so I still got to tell the story that I really wanted to tell. And I just targeted it toward that market. So Unbreak Me, even though I'd already hit the bestsellers list with text appeal, Unbreak Me was really my breakout novel. That was the one that back then, Amazon algorithm was so kind to indie authors. Now it's only kind to indie authors if you're exclusive to Amazon, which I'm not. But whatever, it's fine. I'm still grateful. So it stayed in the top 100 on Amazon 2 months. And wow. I mean, just steady as she goes, right? So I consider that my breakout, even though it wasn't the first one to hit the New York Times. And then I had editors dropping in my inbox. Editors who before wanted nothing to do with me, right? This is a year ago that I'm getting all these rejections, right? And now these editors are in my inbox saying, hey, love to work with you sometime. We really like this book. And so my agent and I were like, let's go out. Let's shop. And so we shopped Unbreak Me, which was already out, and then the following book. And we got 2 really nice offers. And I said no, because one, it's very hard for them to offer enough money to make up for the fact that they're taking 75% of the digital revenue.
Wow.
When I self-publish, that's mine, right? Because you're getting 25% of what they get, not 25% of the cover price, right? So, and I say 25%, but listeners should understand that's your general industry standard, but all contracts are different. So don't assume anything, read the contract. And then of course, it's different percentages for paperback and trade, depending on what you negotiate. But it's hard for them to give you a big enough advance to make up for the fact that they're keeping 75% of that digital revenue. And what I really wanted out of a traditional deal was print distribution. And I had to decide, was that enough to make up for the fact that I would be making so much less money on each book? But the real kicker was that they wanted to price my ebook at $9.99. Now, in fantasy, that's expected, that's typical, that's normal. But at this point, indie publishing was off and running and thriving in romance. And I mean, the indie authors were pricing $2.99 and $3.99 were your major price points at this point in time. And I'm like, you priced me at $9.99. You're killing my digital career before it's truly started. I can't do that. So I walked away. That technology and the change in the way people read is really the reason I walked away and needed to walk away. And it was a great decision. It worked out really well. And one of the reasons my agent has so much of my loyalty is because it would have been good money for him. And he doesn't make any if I indie unless he's selling foreign rights. But he stood by me. He was like, if that's the right decision for you and your family, then do it. But there were just so many things I wanted to financially establish before I was willing to take a pay cut. That sounds crazy, doesn't it? Like you go traditional, you get with a big publisher and you're taking a pay cut. But particularly in romance, where the majority of your sales are digital, yeah, that's what's going to happen. And then I shopped the Black Hawk Boys series as well later and had an offer. And that offer, even my agent was even like, listen, I never tell people to walk away from money. Money is money. You need to sleep on it. However, I see no reason why you would benefit from taking this contract. I was like, yeah, we're on the same page. So at that point, I decided, unless something changes dramatically in the market, which we can talk about later if you want, because it has, I don't think romance is where I want to go for print. At the time, I thought, okay, eventually I'll probably write women's fiction and we'll try for a print deal then. But until then, I think I'm just going to embrace this indie thing. It's just so funny to be traditionally published in foreign markets and get a little more of that respect that comes with being traditionally published in foreign markets than I do at home. But it was a financial decision. It was a decision about control. It was a decision about wanting to like really solidify my fan base with an affordable price point. And so I stayed indie until I decided I actually wanted to write fantasy and young adult fantasy. And that was different because I wanted hardcovers. I wanted to be in bookstores. I wanted to be in book boxes. I can't think small. Like that is, I'm never a person that's like, I'm going to write this book and maybe I'll never let anybody read it and nothing's going to come of it. My brain just immediately goes to, oh, I'm going to write this book. And how can I make it good enough so that people adore it? And how can I make it good enough so it goes viral? And how can I make it good enough so that this kernel in my mind that I love so much would do great on the screen? And I want a Netflix series. Like I can't think small. And so I always laugh when people email me, and I get it a lot for Jackson Harbor. So have you ever thought about like a Netflix series? And it's so sweet. It's like, it's really such a sweet compliment. And my husband and I always joke like, oh, that's a great idea. We should do that. Because of course I'd love that. But yeah, I mean, like my mind I don't think small. I just, like when I started writing, finishing my first romance novel, there was never I don't know if anything will happen with this. It was in my mind, it's like, someday I'm going to be a romance author. Someday I'm going to hit bestseller lists. Someday I've just always believed it. And I think that can hurt more when it's not happening. That can make it hurt more, but it also just drives you, because why wouldn't you keep going if you know Oz is there? I'm on the path to Oz, and yeah, this sucks, but and I really thought it was shorter than this. I signed up for the mile fun run, not the marathon. And yet here I am 13 miles in and I don't see the building, but you're going to get there. Like if you just believe it, of course you don't quit. And, I love that idea that if you don't quit, you haven't failed. I like to tell the story. Like I said, I started with a small press in 2008, 2009, and I'd chosen Lexi Ryan, this like sexy pen name, because I was teaching college students and they didn't need to read what I was writing. And my real name is difficult to spell and difficult to pronounce. And that's not good for marketing. So we made the LexiRyan.com website, and it was probably, oh goodness, it was after my daughter was born. So it would have been 2011, because it was after my daughter was born, but before I decided to try indie publishing. My husband emailed me and I was at work and he said, so your domain's up for renewal. Do you want to renew it? LexiRyan.com. And I was like, I wrote him back right away. And I was like, you know what? Of course, at this point in time, we're young parents. I was a professor, English professor. People think professors get paid bank. English professors do not get paid bank. There's just no. He has a small business that he runs with his dad, but like he's a carpenter. He makes solid income. But like we're young parents paying for daycare. Like there is not lots of extra money. And so my first response was, Lexi was a failed experiment. Shut it down. And as soon as I sent the email, I was like, no. So I wrote him back and I was like, no. Give me another year. Not yet. Let's not let go of this yet. And I always think about that because now, granted, at the time I wasn't really even thinking, I'm never writing again. I was just thinking, okay, I'm going to have to find another way to make this work. But I do think about that instinct of surveying where you've come after all the work, and it being very easy to be like, oh, I failed. When the reality is you're just not there yet.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm really grateful for my unreasonable optimism because, like it's gotten me through.
So do you think that and your picture at the end is what, has fueled you from the beginning as well as I think it took a lot of guts to turn down some of those offers?
Yeah. So it absolutely fuels me. But in addition to like the compulsive need to tell stories. And we always, my writer friends and I, we say like, don't write unless you can't not. If you can't not write, then go ahead and write. But if you're like, I might write, I might not write. I don't know. Most people who make a career writing, we have this compulsive need to tell stories. And for me, a lot of the drive comes from, I want to share my stories with lots and lots of people. There are plenty of writers who are like, I just want to write. I don't care if no one reads it. It can go under my bed. I'm going to set this blog up where I write blog posts, but it's set to private so no one can see it but me. And I'm like, but why? I have always loved the community aspect of stories and of pop culture in general. Like I want to watch the shows everyone's watching. I want to read the books everyone's reading. Not because like I am not an individual, but because those things bring us together. We find common themes. We find things we relate to, things that rub us the wrong way. We talk about them. I've always loved that part of pop culture. And so as a writer, I don't want a few people to maybe think my book's okay. I want like lots of people to have read and experienced the same thing and to connect to each other, to come together because of a story that I put out into the world. And so part of my decision making is often like, even if it's not like obviously I need to pay the bills, but even if it's not a bottom dollar kind of situation, I also look at how many people are going to get my story in their hands if I make this choice. And I want that to be a bigger number. Now, there are some decisions I haven't made, even like if I went exclusive with Amazon for my digital books, that would probably be a bigger number. And I haven't made that jump yet for a variety of reasons. Maybe we shouldn't get into here, but so it's not always the only. There are lots of things. There are lots of things to consider. But yeah, I like community. I like bringing people together. I like to me, that is culture, that connection, that, oh my gosh, we're all individuals with all of these very different experiences. And yet that thing that character's feeling in that moment, we all know what that feels like.
I have read, I think, every single one of your books, and you've put out, I think I count over 35 books.
Yeah, that sounds right.
I'll preface it by saying that it's getting close to 2 years ago now, there was this thing that popped up on my Facebook feed, and there's an interesting picture with it. And I'm like, what is this? And so I started reading it, and it was a snippet from Shay and Easton's story in Jackson Harbor.
If It's Only Love.
Yep. I had never read anything of the sort. So I started reading the little snippet. I clicked on it and I read the whole thing. I think it was the first chapter of the book. And I just remember going, what is this? This is really good. And I clicked on it. I'm like, oh, it's a book. I'm like, well, I need to read the whole thing. And that's how I fell down the rabbit hole of Lexi Ryan. But I love the book, and your characters are so intriguing. And it doesn't matter if they're kind of the villain or, in that moment, or if they're the heroine or hero, you just fall in love with them for the fact that there's such a connection. But I feel like what you were talking about with the community, there's such a community within your book. And I quickly realized it was part of a series, and I'm like, I need to start at book 1. So I got the whole series up to that. You kind of just drop a bomb, towards the end of them, and like everything's revealed. Like I'm thinking the manila envelope in the last book in Jackson Harbor. I was like, whoa, my mind was blown when you dropped that in the restaurant there. How did that come together? It seems it's so fun to read.
Oh, thank you. My process, I just can't even. When we talk about process, the most important thing I like to tell people is like, you have to honor your process, whatever it is. You have to trust it and honor it, especially. I mean, like when you're first writing, you're trying to figure it out. Like, what kind of writer am I? Do I plot? Do I like seat in my pants? What am I doing? So you have to trust your process after a few books, though, because like you said, 35 books or so, something like that. And I always write out of order.
Oh, okay.
I don't know what's going to happen. I might know some things.
Thorin Designs knows your next big marketing idea could be huge for your business and its future. Talk to them about your business's design and marketing needs. They're here to help with graphic design, branding, book design, websites, social media, and more. You can find them at www.thorindesigns.com or follow them on Instagram and Facebook at Thorin Designs.
I love to write love triangles, and my favorite way to write a love triangle is not knowing which guy she's going to end up with.
You have me on pins and needles with these hollow vials, by the way, with that. I'm almost done with the second one. I'm 75% done. So don't spoiler alert it. But that triangle, I think, is your greatest one yet.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I really enjoyed that one. I enjoy all of them. I'm like such a love triangle lover. And yeah, I'm super fussy about the way they're done, but I love them. Give me Vampire Diaries, Stefan and Damon. I'm like, yes. Yeah. I really like to not know things. And as much as my life would be easier and I would have to do so much less rewriting if I plotted out books, I've tried it. I sold these hollow vows on proposal. And when you sell on proposal, you're sending in a synopsis in like maybe the first 30 to 50 pages. And they're like, yep, we think you can write this book well. And so here's the money for it. So go write it. And I wasn't sure I'd be able to sell on proposal since YA fantasy was a new genre for me. But my synopsis, because again, I'm not a plotter, but here I'm supposed to like give you a synopsis of the whole book, beginning to end. You put all the spoilers in there. Like there's nothing held back in a synopsis. Synopsis is like, here's what you read if you want to ruin the reading experience. I hate writing. Everyone hates writing. So I know very few people who are like, yay, I get to write a synopsis today. No, it's awful. So I wrote that synopsis the same way I write a book. I was like, okay, here's a paragraph about this one thing I think happens. And here's a paragraph about this other thing that I think happens. And so when I write a book, I write these bits and pieces. I'm a quilter. So I patchwork. Like I know this, I see this scene in my head. I see this moment in my head. I have this snippet of dialogue. And then I get to a point, usually halfway in, that I have to step back, see what I have, rearrange it all, and rewrite everything to make it work, which I did the synopsis the same way. Now things still changed quite a bit from the synopsis to the final draft, because that's just the way I roll. I'm a discovery writer. But so many of those moments that, you're like, how did you figure this out? Where did that come from? To me, that's the magic. I love that. It's so painful trying to get there when you're like trying to wrap up a book and you're like, I've put them in a corner and nothing good can come of this. Like I've promised my readers happily ever after, and I don't know how to get there. But when it comes, when the girls in the attic, I think is what Jennifer Crusie called them, the little goblins up in your head that are kind of constantly spinning and working on plot problems when you're just in the shower or driving down the road, that's the magic to me. I love that. It feels like the story's already there and I'm just trying to find it. When I'm super frustrated, I'll be like, okay, my process is putting together a puzzle in the dark with only like a third of the pieces, and I'm a little drunk. That's how it feels, So it feels like it's already there and it's just my job to like unearth it, which is a little woo-woo, but it works for me. So I just try to not be too frustrated. It's hard, it requires a lot of rewriting. It's not efficient, but I try to just have faith that it's worked all these other times. It's going to work this time too.
I'm trying to visualize this romance writing creative process, because you sound very pragmatic and strategic in the business sense.
Yes.
And then you have this other brain that is completely untethered from all of that. And I'm thinking of like, it's Friday night and you're like, honey, I'm really stuck on this scene and I need to work through it with you. And then I'm thinking, do therapists prescribe romance novels for couples therapy? Like, how does it work in your own life and writing triangles and all of that?
So my husband does help me plot sometimes, help me brainstorm, help me fix things. A few of the things he's helped me with, I can't explain. I wish I could, but they're such spoilers. And I'm like, it hurts me too much to give spoilers, even if like nobody here is going to read the books. But and this is like, I just won't say what book because I have lots of pregnancies and lots of books. I have a book where I'm like, okay, so what do you say? You find out this woman you're in love with, this woman that, you know, you finally think you have a chance of getting back, and you find out she's pregnant with another man's baby. And my husband's like, I'm out. And I'm like, wait, no.
Wrong answer.
No. Try again. And he's like, no, that's the guy's still in the picture. He still kind of wants to be with, like, I can't, I'm out. And I'm like, you are amazing and I love you and I'm so grateful to be married to you, but you do not have a future as a romance hero. You're not out. You're like doubling down. Come on, try again. But no, he does help me plot sometimes. I'm terrible at plotting for one reason, because when I break down a plot and I'm like, and this happens, then this happens, I always think it sounds so stupid. Like, oh man, like, I really liked this before. And now when I like break it down into a few sentences, I'm like, I know that sounds dumb, but I promise when you're on the page. Yeah. But so day to day, I mean, yeah, we plot together. I think romance novels, I wish they're not for everyone. And I respect that, completely respect that. But what I love about them, especially the specific genre in which I write, steamy, I like to think empowering. I feel like we're teaching women who read them, your dreams matter, your goals and desires matter, and God forbid, but super, super important, your pleasure matters. I realize like not everybody cares. There's truly some asexual people out there who are like, yeah, but I don't really care about my pleasure. And I'm like, that's fine. That's fine. But the vast majority of women who are in sexually unsatisfying relationships don't truly feel like, oh, my pleasure I don't really care. I don't really care. It's just not happening because of so many things in our culture teach women it's about his pleasure. Mm-hmm. It's about serving him. You take romance, which people often, especially people who don't read in the genre, mistake as anti-feminist. And it's one of the most feminist genres out there. Yep. Because it is rewriting the script on the dynamics, particularly in heterosexual relationships. Now, we could get into gay romance, poly romance. I don't write that, but I would venture to say that most of it pushes some boundaries and some cultural assumptions as well. So I think, man, yeah, I wish couples would read it. You know, like I want my daughter to read romance because I want her to find herself in a relationship where she takes it like it's assumed that who she is and what she wants from a big picture career level, from a life dreams level down to the level of sexual pleasure matters. It matters. It is not all about the other person. And it goes both ways. And that there is pleasure in giving pleasure and that there is pleasure in receiving pleasure. So like, I'm like super, I feel like writing sexy romance is a political statement. It's a political move that's really important to me. And I think that it can be very beneficial for unmarried people to read it and to go into their romantic relationships with notions of, you know, like sex should be good. Laurie Foster's husband, Laurie Foster is a contemporary romance author who's been around for a long time. She's awesome. But her husband used to sell mugs and shirts that said, not on the cover, but between the pages, meaning like, hey, like, yeah, most guys aren't going to have like the ripped abs and like, yeah, I'm not that. But this person that's being written about in these pages, the care and the support and the relationship. Yeah, we can be that. Mm-hmm. And that's the part that really matters anyway.
I found that I think every single one of your characters shows that strength and courage and you throw some huge challenges at some of them and insurmountable sometimes it seems even. Yet they are so fierce and strong. And sometimes I think your stories, through the story, they are finding their strength and their voice or to overcome in the challenges. So it sounds like that is definitely by design. And as you said, a little bit of feminism, but, to show that strength is, I thought was, and how you display it for each character, I find very interesting. Is that something that you have found hard to create, or is just so it comes so naturally to you?
I mean, it comes from a few different places. It's what I like to write. So it comes naturally because to me, it's interesting. Then if I'm not engaged, oh my gosh, you don't want to read it, right? But it comes from a couple places. It comes from, so Jane Ann Krantz says everybody has their core story that they write over and over and over again. And it's just boil it down to one thing. And I truly believe my core story is I love you as you are. All of the mistakes you've made, all of the flaws that you have, all of the things that you don't love about yourself. I love you as you are. That's my core story. The characters often need to catch up to that. But it also comes from back to that connection and the community and the bringing people together. I also want people to understand each other and to be more empathetic with each other. So I love to take characters who have made a decision that you might not understand, that you might think, oh my God, I would never do that. I have a character in my football series that when she was in high school, she was caught on her knees, surrounded by a bunch of boys. This happened. Oh. There was a school dance. Somebody went upstairs. There was like a back hallway that went upstairs above where the dance was. And this little girl, to me, little, because she was like in 8th grade. To me, that's baby. She was on her knees, surrounded by a bunch of basketball players with their pants down. And as a mom, you're like, oh my gosh, it breaks my heart. Yeah. But I immediately want to know, what was it that made her feel like that was the right decision in the moment? What was said to her? What was she made to believe? How was she made to feel about herself that she made that choice? Right. So we can all be like, oh my God, never, like that. I respect myself too much. I want to take that moment and create a character where you're like, honey, why did you do that? But I guess I get it. And I feel for you. I wish you hadn't made that choice, but you can still be my bestie because I still love and respect you. And I'm going to take your hand and watch you grow and become a person who won't let others pressure you into doing something that you don't want to do just because you've been led to believe that's the only way you have value. So I find it so compelling for myself as the writer, for the one who's putting the story together, be like, okay, why would somebody do this? I want to figure it out. I want to dig in.
In my opinion, that was the best book in the series.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. And I was like, just like you, it's like, why would you do that? But the way you unravel it and show her psychology of that and what actually happened, it is really heartbreaking. And you feel so much compassion for the character in that you almost care more about them than some of the other characters.
Right.
So I think, for me, reading that, I had the same emotions, and it's like, wait, how did that happen? How do you make that decision? And the way you unravel it, it just makes you feel even more compelled with the character.
And that's always my goal, and then if we then like approach the real world with just a little bit more empathy and just a little bit less judgment. And, even just that piece in the back of our mind, that's like, there's more to this story. We don't know everything.
Right.
Then mission accomplished.
Have you found, I'm thinking about the feminist aspect and how young women view themselves, that social media has, and the way women portray themselves or are portrayed, or expectations, enhancement apps, and all of these different things, that it impacts how the messages that you try to send, or does that have any relationship at all?
I don't think there's any avoiding it. Like, I think social media and the good and bad that it's brought to the culture affects all of us, whether we engage with the platforms or not. And it is both good and bad. Like, there's so much good stuff out there. Like, I scroll through TikTok and all of this. I've been a big girl my whole life. Never, ever would I have gone to the beach in a bikini as a big girl, but it's become so much more common because of social media, because of generally very, very beautiful plus size women showing off their curves, showing off their bigger bodies. But now we're like, if we take our kids to a water park and walk around, I'm always like, babe, oh my gosh, because I love to see big women more comfortable in their skin, right? It makes me, because nothing good comes of that shame. And like, I'm going to wear a big t-shirt and shorts because I don't want people to see me. I mean, some people want to shame bigger people because they're like, it's not healthy. Well, you shaming them isn't actually going to make them healthier.
Right.
No, not going to help anything. But if you empower them and they feel good about their bodies, maybe they'll join you in the next fitness class that you take because they feel good about their bodies and they want to treat their bodies right. So some good stuff has come out of it for sure. But oh my gosh, the filters. I like makeup. I think makeup should be fun. My daughter plays with makeup a lot. She likes to do like lots of different looks. And when I say different looks, she'll be like, this is my like fire and ice. And she'll have like flames over here. And like, it's just, she's an artist and it's awesome. But she plays with makeup. And then she also likes to wear it. I mean, she's kind of young. She's 11, but she'll wear like a little lip gloss and mascara to school. And I'm like, you don't need that, but it's okay. I told you once upon a time, this was what you could wear at this age. And every parent needs to make their own decision there. But I think we look at ourselves in these filters over and over and over again. And then the reality feels disappointing when nobody can like really look like that all the time. I used to be on Snapchat. And I still have an account, but I don't use it. So somebody got a Lexi Ryan request the other day. It wasn't from my account, but she thought it might actually be me. And she opened the video and was, it wasn't what she thought she was going to get. But anyway, so I was on there all the time and I love that big-eyed ad. It's like the filter where the eyes go really big and there are lots of lashes and the lips get big. I think it's the one that that comedian uses where she's the comedian that, I don't know if you know her, I don't remember her name, where I ain't doing it is her thing. And she uses the same Snapchat filter all the time. And my sisters and I would send little voice texts to each other with that. And so I'm constantly seeing myself with it. It's comically altered, right? Like this isn't real, but then you want your eyes to be bigger and your lips to be bigger and your, and your eyelashes to be longer. So it definitely skews our perception of how we should look. And that's happening regardless. In our culture, you should have white teeth, right? Like normal teeth are not as white as most Americans' teeth. Like if you live your life and eat food.
Right.
But we've made like whitening such a mainstream thing. And I like on my list for this week to put, some whitening strips on. I like it when my smile is a little whiter and brighter. But we kind of just accept that as a norm, right? The big lashes now are a thing. Fun. There's nothing wrong with that. If you enjoy big lashes, that's fine. But then you accept it as a norm. And suddenly when you're looking at your natural lashes, you're like, oh my gosh, they're so short and stubby. No, they're just eyelashes. They're just eyelashes. So there can definitely be downsides to it. And I think it all just comes back to that's always going to change, right? It's always going to be in flux. What's viewed as acceptable, what's viewed as ideal. And we have to do whatever it is we need to do to, at our core, be who we are and be okay with that. And it's not always easy. Like, man, there are days that it is tough to love my bigger body, right? Like I go through phases where I'm like, oh, it's such a relief to not hate myself anymore. And I think I'm over it. And I've arrived. I'm never going to have to fight with this again. Oh, no. So I would hope, my goal, maybe it's impossible, is to like show characters who go on that journey and hope that the readers feel empowered to do so themselves.
I think you accomplish that for sure. And I think what you were just saying about the characters, whatever their challenges are, I feel like you take us on a journey with them and, we feel such compassion. And, like I said earlier, even when their challenges seem insurmountable, their strength really what I think is at the core of the book. But let me switch gears a little bit because this year was a big year for you. You had two books that came out in July. You had these Twisted Bonds, a second in your young adults. And by the time this comes out, the fourth book in the Orchid Valley, the one we have been waiting for a long time it will have come out.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about that? And what you want to tell us a little bit about that?
So these Twisted Bonds came out in July, and I have to say, huge props to readers on this series, because when These Hollow Vows, book one, it's a duology. Cliffhanger at the end of book one goes into book two. And when These Hollow Vows came out, and it was like a week before release that my publisher finally shared the print run, it was not a good print run.
Oh.
And I won't get into numbers specifically, but I'll just say that because of the way publishing works and returns work, when it is considered an excellent sell-through, if you sell 40 to 50% of your print run.
Okay.
Like that is excellent.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw this print run and my brain immediately goes 50%. And I'm like, that's unacceptable. But they had to go back to print pretty soon. Normally this would be we're very excited, we're going to share it with you thing. Nobody told us. And I think it's because they knew we were upset about the initial print run. And then it had to go back to print again. And then it had to go back to print again. That was readers. That was readers buying the books, talking about the book, making other people want to buy the book. When These Twisted Bonds came out, it hit number 1 on the New York Times list, which was, it's a very freaking big deal. Like, I'm super proud of that. And I'm so excited. But I'm almost more proud of the 3-4 months after release New York Times hit that These Hollow Vows had, because there are just so many books in the bookstore. You're going to sell enough to hit the New York Times. It was, we better print more books. We better print more books. And that is readers. That is readers making magic happen. So because they made magic happen for book 1, magic was a little more instantaneous for book 2. And I feel like I had certain goals with this series. And if it hadn't been for readers being so incredibly vocal and awesome, I never would have seen them happen. So I'm like incredibly grateful. That's been a lot of fun to be able to break into a new genre at all and find some success there. I love fantasy, but I always felt like I wasn't quite, I consider myself a very smart person. So I always like hesitate to be like, I'm not smart enough, but the kind of mind it takes to put together some of these fantasy worlds, I'm just in awe, right? Like, I'm just like, how? And I didn't really have faith for a long time that I had the ability to do that until I just kind of hit a point where I was like, well, I have to write this story. I need to kill some big bad guys. Really, like, I was just like, life was hard and bad things were happening in the world. And I was like, I just need a minute where like there's a monster and the monster can be dead at the end, which you don't get to do very often in contemporary romance, metaphorically maybe, but not literally. July was incredible. I was alone in a hotel room trying to finish Every Chance with You when I found out that These Twisted Bonds hit at number 1. And so that was interesting. I was on a writing retreat. So I went down to the bar and had a drink with a bunch of strangers and was like, my book just hit number 1. And they were very awesome about it. If I didn't know anything about publishing and there was this random chick at the bar, like celebrating her career accomplishment, I would be like, good on you. They were, thank goodness for the kindness of strangers. And yeah, so I was actually finishing Every Chance with You, very different publishing timeline for the indie books, which comes out October 25th. So it will be out when this lands. And it's the 4th book of my Orchid Valley series. Now, I write a lot about big families. I love big families. I come from a big family. I'm the youngest of 7. Yeah, I know, right? I did not have many children myself. I have 2 because as a child, I loved having lots of siblings. As a mother, I had limits. Right? Like, I'm like, I don't know how my mom did it. So yeah, it's not happening. So I write a lot of big families, but in Orchid Valley, I decided to focus it more around found family. My Black Hawk Boys are kind of that way too, really returning to that idea of, we choose who we let be our family. We make our own family is the line from Every Little Piece of Me, which is the first book in the Orchid Valley series. Just like a very important piece of that book, but also like the series overall, because someone sharing our blood doesn't mean that they're never going to disappoint us, doesn't mean that they're always going to be there in the way we need them to be there for us. But that doesn't mean that no one can be there in the way we need them to be there for us. So I've really enjoyed writing a found family series like I have in Orchid Valley. And book 4 that will have just landed, Every Chance with You, is a love triangle. It's we've been following Savannah Savvy since book 1. She meets the hero and heroine in book 1 are reunited in Vegas at the beginning, and she meets the hero's best friend and seems like they're hitting it off swimmingly and they're going to be great together. And for the next couple of books, you're like, wait, she just totally dropped that and isn't dating him, and why? Is it just the distance thing?
It's so disappointing.
Yeah, everybody loved Alec. What's going on here? Like when she first met him, she's like, oh, you're gonna have my babies, your eyes are so pretty. So the question was, well, why? Why did she go from you're gonna have my babies and they had this awesome night together to yeah, I think we should just be friends.
Mm.
So turns out that after they met in Vegas, so this is like 2.5 years before book 4 begins, turns out that she showed up on his doorstep, and the guy who broke her heart in college answered the door. And it turns out that they are half brothers and they hate each other. And she doesn't want to explain her relationship with the guy from college to the guy she met in Vegas. So kind of running from Oliver, who's from her past, she chooses to not be with Alec. And then this book, of course, throws them all together again because of a wedding and some needs for some fake dates and all the tropes I love so much. Forced proximity, love triangle, second chance romance. It was a lot of fun and actually became, more than I expected, a story about like redemption within a family and brotherhood and that difficult father-son relationship when we have imperfect parents. So I'm really excited for that to come out and for my Orchid Valley fans to get a happy ending for Savvy, because
she deserves it.
She deserves it. You know, what's fun is when I started writing her book, I'm very I write about all kinds of people. I write big girls, but I don't always write big girls. I write skinny girls, but I don't always write skinny girls. I worked in a fitness center after grad school. And when I was working there, I learned very quickly, oh, look, we all hate our bodies. Don't be jealous of the skinny girl. Like, she hates her body too. Don't worry, you're together in this. It's not a great thing, but it's true. That feeling of, I feel like there's something less than about my physique isn't always something I deal with in my books, but I do frequently. And that can be expressed with any number of body types. So I'm writing Savvy. Savvy is a personal trainer. She teaches like pole fitness and spin classes and trains people. And I'm like, and she's blonde and she's like got this perfect little body. I'm like, how am I going to get into this girl's head? I love fitness. Okay. But she's like, look at her. She's perfect. How am I going to? So I always bring it back to like, what are my core beliefs, right? And if I am having trouble connecting to a character and I give them one of my core beliefs, then suddenly things click. So for me, with her, I had to be like, okay, why is she passionate about fitness? And so I got to examine that in her past a little bit and how passionate she is about making women stronger and about teaching women to focus on being stronger and not being smaller, which is one of my like soapbox things. Be healthy, be strong. If small comes with it and that's what you want, that's great. But that doesn't need to be the primary goal. And so suddenly it was fun to like find my way into her character when I felt like a little blocked off. I'm like, I'm feeling great about myself right now. How can I connect to you when you are this person and then I'm like, okay, this is how I'm going to give you this backstory where you learned how important it is to be strong and found so much empowerment from it, like I do. And now we're on the same page and now I can get into your head. There's my path into your head.
I like that. Now I'll have to read it with a different perspective.
I hope you like it.
I'm so excited.
So we're at that moment.
Unfortunately,
where we have to wrap up with the final question, which is, Lexi, what advice would you give to people, men and women, on how to move their own Moxie needle? Just one baby step, one click.
So I'm going to go back to the advice that I give writers, which is, there are a few pieces, but the final piece of advice is continue beyond when all evidence would indicate that you've failed. Just keep going.
I love that. I got goosebumps. We'll have to get that stenciled on the wall to remind ourselves.
Well, I also like that if you don't quit, you haven't failed, that you said earlier. So that's 2 ways to look at that. That
Thank works.
You. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time and joining us and sharing your story and stories with us and our listeners. And we hope that everyone enjoys it and checks out some of your books, whether they're into young adult, which is fantastic, by the way, the series. I'm almost done. I love it. Or any of your romance novels or whatever you may take on in the future.
I really appreciate it.
We'll watch out for Netflix series based on your
Yeah. Oh my gosh, can you imagine the overlapping timelines? It could be so much fun.
It could be.
Call me Netflix. Donda in particular, dream bucket list.
Well, I have read, when I'm reading some of your books, I'm like, this would make such a great series, but I don't know if they could capture all the details though. That's my only hang up.
Romance on the screen is tough because it's so internal.
Right.
Yeah.
It's so internal. But look what they've done with Bridgerton.
Yes.
I'm just saying.
Just saying.
You know where to find me.
Thank you, Lexi.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Wow, that was a fun conversation.
Wasn't it? And you are one who has not really been into romance. And before I quote unquote met Lexi and her stories, I wasn't either. So how did you feel about that?
So I think I've been giving romance short shrift.
Mm-hmm.
My exposure to romance were Harlequin romances sitting on the supermarket rack at the checkout.
Yeah.
So I never really paid much attention to them, but I was very much intrigued by the feminist aspects of what she writes, and also this core story that she talked about of accepting people as they are, including yourself.
Yeah.
So those were interesting to me. And the fact that she seems to move effortlessly between this very strategic business mind and then this completely untethered imagination that's able to create these characters and situations and triangles. So yeah, I'm motivated to check out some of her books now.
That's awesome. I mean, before I quote unquote met her in the first book, as I shared in the interview, that I just happened upon through a Facebook sponsored post that she did. I had never read it. And I guess I too had a bias to it. I'm like, romance, my mom reads those or something like that. But the contemporary genre of romance is very different. And I found that it's very empowering. So I loved hearing her explanation of it and her equating it to feminism, because I can totally see it and how, you do always get the happily ever after. But I've read, I read everything by her. And then once I was finished with that, I had, there's nothing more to read in her after her 35 books. So I found some other authors, friends of hers. And then, I just rabbit holed from there. And sometimes it's about 3/4 of the way through, sometimes when they're faced with a quote unquote biggest challenge, you're like, they're not going to get through this. How are they going to get through this? How is this going to end? But these types of stories are just so fascinating, and the strength of character often, and especially for Lexi, the way she writes her female heroines, it's really inspirational. And even though you may not relate to them, you do, or what's happening in their life, because you're like, oh, I'll never do that, or I'll never put myself in the position. But you feel such compassion for these characters that you're like, oh, I understand now. And I think what she said about, I guess, feeling compassion for people in your everyday life, you're kind of learning from what you're reading, and you're like, oh, I can apply that to real life, because I don't know what that person is going through. And, just about what she was talking about with the body image. I mean, that's something we can all relate to, no matter what size you are. There's just so much there. And I think she takes so much of her passion and her thinking, and you can read it off the pages of her books. And there's so much that inspires you from it.
Well, and she just released a new book last week. So you can find links to her website to get access to that book on the podcast in our show notes.
Mary, are you going to start with the young adults, or are you going to dive right into the romance?
I think I'm going to start with the young adult.
Okay, good choice.
That's kind of where I am right now.
That sounds great. And I'm excited for you to, when you come into the office, to tell me what you think.
Exactly. I will do. All right. Take care.
Bye. This episode of Main Street Moxie is proudly sponsored by Oblong Books and Thorn Designs.